Everybody, the video from yesterday. I just sent it, and as I mentioned in the email, I am really bad at video editing, and by bad I mean really bad. So the sequence isn't quite right. We had two videos, one before and one after, and so they got mixed up somehow. So you'll need to start more towards the middle of the video. But either way, it's about an hour and a half. And like I mentioned yesterday, we have a bunch of videos from last class. So we're going to have a full complement of videos for you guys to access. I mean, literally, it's going to be probably 50 or 60 hours by the time we're all said and done. And you'll be able to access them after the class. So not only will you have access to the portal and all the stuff that we have in the portal and the lessons there, but you'll have access to the videos. So there's that. Also, it occurred to me that we haven't really covered with you guys or given you access to a syllabus, a quote-unquote syllabus. And we have this up on the portal, and I just made it available. And this is just a breakdown week by week of the things we want to cover. As you guys are obviously aware, we're in week 3. And this week looks like it's light, but we're really diving into kind of the heart and soul of Rails. We're going to do a real deep dive into Rails today and really do a breakdown of how it's organized and what it does. And then tomorrow and Thursday, we'll spend time on MVC and routing. So this week is, I think, pretty good. It's a pretty fun week because last week was pretty intense. And then next week will be a little bit tricky. If you've never done anything with databases, next week is tricky. So go ahead and gird yourselves. So with that said, are there any questions about Git? Anything you guys want to kind of cover real quick before we dive into Rails? Anything trip you guys up with Git yesterday and GitHub? Okay. I'll come back to that and keep.
My question wasn't necessarily something that tripped me up. It's more of just a kind of a difference between what GitHub is, that's a repository.
Yeah.
And what is Heroku?
Oh, okay, cool. Good question. And we're gonna do.
I've seen that before.
Yeah.
I have an account there too. So.
Heroku is a platform as a service. How many of you guys have heard of a software as a service, SaaS? Okay, SaaS is a business model where you pay for software monthly. My company, We & Co, is a SaaS. People don't pay us a one-time fee. They don't pay us an installation fee. They pay us $70 a month to access our tool. That's a SaaS. Heroku takes that one step up, and it's called a platform as a service. So it's basically paying for server space, database space, all the kind of infrastructure you need to host a website, but paying for it monthly. And Heroku has a free tier, which is what we'll use in this class. But it's basically a place to host your Heroku apps, your Rails apps. And so what we'll do with this class is kind of an end-to-end thing where we start with real basic HTML, CSS, then we do some Ruby, then we do Rails, then we kind of teach you guys how to build websites on Rails, and then we teach you how to deploy them with Heroku.
Would AWS be a platform as a service?
AWS is a platform as a service, and that's what we use at my company. We use AWS. Because AWS is good because because we have some PHP, some Java, some .NET, some Ruby, and so AWS is more of a blank canvas. You can do a lot with it, but it requires a lot more skill. Okay. Whereas Heroku's like push, and now it's not that easy, but it's pretty much that easy. Okay. AWS is a little bit tougher.
Are they competitors?
Yeah. Well, okay, here's the interesting thing. They're kind of competitors, kind of not. The closest competitor to Amazon is Rackspace and Google App Engine. Interestingly enough, Heroku actually uses AWS. Heroku, you don't realize it, but actually under the hood, that's what they've built all of Heroku on top of is AWS. So
you can't deploy a Rails app just on a domain name that you go by with a regular web hosting service?
It's not that easy. Rails is just it requires a little bit more infrastructure on a server. It requires a certain kind of web server because the most common web server is Apache. So PHP and a bunch of common languages run on, and Rails can't run on Apache or doesn't run typically on Apache. So you have to have a special web server. Amy, you had a question?
I just wanted
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So you mean actually creating a Rails app and putting it on GitHub? Cool. Let's go ahead and do that. Well, to review yesterday, and it'll be a good app to use to cover today's lesson. So we'll review everything we did yesterday, and we'll do it in about 10 minutes. Okay? So, but you guys are going to walk me through this. I'm going to let you guys guide me. So what's the very first thing I do? We sit down, we're like, we're going to build a cool-ass website, guys. What do we do? What's the first thing?
Rails new and then your project.
Bingo! Tyler, our idea is awesome, okay? Rails new, awesome website. Okay? So you're exactly right. We always start with Rails new, awesome website or whatever the heck it is. And what does that do while it's chewing on that? What are the things that it's doing?
So creating all the folders.
Uh-huh.
Your apps folders.
Setting up the basics, right? Now, Rails new whatever project name. Oh shoot! I'm not sure I'm in the right place. Okay, I'm in the. No, I'm not in the right place. Bummer. What cardinal sin did I just create that I've been lecturing you guys on? I don't know what directory I'm in. Bingo. I'm in. Yeah, CD Rails. Okay. There we go. Now we can do it. So you guys are all following along. Create your website. We're going to use this website. We're going to post it to GitHub. We're going to use it for today's lesson, which is all about the anatomy of Rails. I figured out my computer's so slow because I'm dangerously close to running out of hard drive space, which is a bad thing to be in. It's a bad place to be, guys.
My hard drive's only 50 gigabytes.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I had it bad. I have 128.
It's the price I pay for the not HD ones. Not the hard disk ones.
Oh, the solid state?
Yeah.
Is that solid state? Oh, okay. This is solid state too. What in the world was that? Oh, I just got a warning. Okay, cool. So, okay, so I created my project, and I got a warning, but I think I'll be fine. I don't see any problems with this. I've never seen this one before, though. All right, so now that I've got my project, what do I do next? Yes. See it. And it's awesome website. I got right here. Yeah, I thought it said warning. Oh yeah, warning. Insecure world writable. Yeah. Okay, so okay, CD into the directory, yep. Okay, now we have a basic Rails project, right? And I'm kind of meticulous. I like to see if it runs. I want to see if it just basically runs out of the box. So what do I do now? What's the next thing to do? Well, we want to start the server. So Rails S? Yeah. So Rails S. So no, we haven't done any scaffolding. We haven't created anything. We've just created the project. And now I'm just going to make sure it runs. That's all I'm going to do. Okay? And so you can either do Rails S or Rails Server. We're going to just do Rails S.
You're aggressively lazy.
I am aggressively lazy. I don't know what that means, but I like it. So basically, at this stage, I'm running a web server. Okay, I'm running a web server through this terminal window. And I know that because it just says WebBrick HTTP server start. If there's something wrong with your project and it can't compile, your server won't start. You'll get an error back. And we're going to see that a bunch of times. So get used to it. But in this case, we know we're running, and we know we're running right here. It gives us the URL. Grab that. And voila. This is all we're confirming. If you see this screen, you know that your project built fine. We're good to go. Everybody's happy.
I got a question on the screen.
Yeah.
Is this like format you would have to clear or?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. Yeah. This is basically, so if you read this thing, it says, generate your models and controllers or scaffolds, set up a root page to replace this page, and then configure database. Okay, so we've confirmed our project set up. Everything's good to go. I mean, there's obviously a couple different paths we can go down here, but what path do we want to go down now? What do we want to do next? Yeah, so you guys are both right. So we're going to kill the server, Control C, and we're going to initialize this as a Git repository, okay? And that's git init, right? So now we have initialized this as a Git repository. We haven't really done anything else. We just said, hey, this is going to start tracking this with Git, but there's several more steps we have to do. What's the next step? We could add, there's a couple different paths here. I would just like to go ahead and go create the repository on GitHub. So let's go do that.
Do you get init before you do the scaffolding?
Yeah, well, it's all order preference, right? Like, I like to go ahead and get a basic project set up and make sure it runs, and then put that into Git, and then start scaffolding. So, but you could do scaffolding now if you wanted to. Okay, so let's go. So I'll go to GitHub, and remember, just scroll down. You're already logged in, and you're going to click this new repository button right here on the right-hand side, and I'm calling it Awesome Website. And then create repository. And the nice thing is when you do this, you now have all the steps to follow verbatim right here. There is no rocket science for getting this thing set up at this point. It tells you exactly what to do. And you can follow them line by line, or in our case, I skipped the README because we're just kind of breezing through some of the stuff. But git init, git add, git commit, and then you add a connection to the remote repository, and then you push. So let's all do that.
Don't you need the period after add, or is that?
Yeah. So at this point, they assume you haven't set up. They're assuming you're creating a blank repository on your server.
Okay.
So they don't think you've created any code. We've created code, so you need to do git add dot.
For the Git push on the last line, I can't see what that is in between the push.
Dash U?
Dash U. Do you need that every time?
No.
Or-
I've never used the dash U. I don't really honestly know what that flag means. I've never needed it, but you could certainly, it looks like you could pass it. So everybody's following along. So now we need to go in and git add, right? Who wants to remind me what git add does?
As the folder that you're working
It
in.
adds the folder. Does it commit it? Does it push it? No. It just tells Git to track that file or folder. In this particular case, by using the dot, we're saying everything in the folder we're currently in. Okay? So what do I do next? I've added them. Now what do I need to do? Yep. Okay? So we've committed them. Is this now on GitHub? Nope. I've just now committed my changes to my local repository. And because this is a distributed source code management system, all of these files exist on my local machine. So all the changes I made, as well as all the any other files, are stored on my local computer. Okay? In a funny little folder called .git. Remember that? The folder I told you never to mess with? That's where all that's stored. Okay. Because this is a brand new repo, we have to do something that's unique that we will never do again. What do we need to do? Yeah, we need to do this. We need to tie these two repos together. Now, I just said this, but we will never do this again on this repo. You do it once when you're setting it up, and you never do it again. Git remote add origin.
That ever change?
Would that ever change? If something changed about Git, I mean, somebody make a big change in Git. But then other than that, as long as I've been using Git, which is about 5 years at this point, it's always been the same steps to set up a repo. Okay, so now, yep.
Sorry, just to be clear, if you weren't, just wanted to be clear, just when you're adding a file, you just do the push origin master, you wouldn't do that link.
This.
Correct.
Yeah, this is only done when you set up the repo. Never again. Not when you add a file, not when you delete a file. Not when you do a cartwheel, not when you push. You do it once, and that's
So
it.
if you're just adding a new file, you just do the git commit and then the push origin master. Okay.
You're missing something.
Git add before.
Yes. Yep.
So you do the git add. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going down. I'm just writing down the steps so I can make sure I do that.
So I did the git init and then the git add, but I noticed on my terminal I wasn't getting any sort of response.
On git add, you will not.
And also on the git commit, you don't get a response either.
No, you do. Git commit, you should see this.
I copied the one that was in the web page, so I had git commit space -m and then the quotations. But yesterday I remember there was an A.
Yeah, Kevin just asked me that. So Git, what GitHub assumes is that you have no code. You're setting up an empty folder on your side. We skip that step. We actually have code, so you have to do git add dot.
Did
You did that,
that. Yeah.
and then git commit.
Git commit space -m and then quotations.
Yeah, and you didn't get.
Dash A.
Dash A.
Okay. Yeah, that's another one that because mine didn't see
Yeah,
the dash.
you-
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, but
You need the dash in.
I can't figure out when you need it and when you don't, so I always pass it.
I was having
And remember, you can always do git status. So at this point,
I think so.
oh, if you're still on your server, then
Because you didn't get any messages underneath. Like,
okay. So let's keep moving. So git status, remember, is a good thing to run. You always kind of do a little sanity check. I have committed everything, so this tells me nothing to commit, which is a tiny bit of a misleading message. What I would like it to say is there's nothing to commit, but there's something to push, right? Remember, there's a two-step process to getting stuff onto GitHub. You commit, then you push. Well, I haven't pushed anything yet, right? So what's the next step to run? What do I need to do next? Push. Okay. So now, and you see this, right? Total blah, 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 blah. Not the most elegant of success messages, but we know it worked by going back here. And if we refresh, we should see all of our code. Any questions? Okay. Yes.
So I just did all the steps that we just did, and I keep getting the oops message when I go back to the repo. And that's where I was last night.
Wait, the oops message. Wait, hold on. Oops message on GitHub or on your personal project?
For the URL.
Okay. So everybody look up here. Everybody look up here. When you get an oops message, what might be going on? You're not running your local server. Almost certainly.
But isn't that why we did the Control C earlier?
To stop the server. But you have to start the server if you want to see.
At what point in the process?
Whenever you want to see web pages. If you want to see if you want to see this thing right here, a web server is, think of a web server as being no different than any other software program that runs. If you turn it on, it'll work. If you turn it off, it won't work. You got to turn it back on and turn it off. And get used to, you'll be turning it on, turning it off, turning it on, turning it off, turning it on, turning it off.
So after the push origin master.
You can, the answer is there's no answer. There's no like right time to start it back up. Whenever you want to go see web pages, whenever you want to see this, Like right now, if what happens, I mean, we guys were watching on my screen. What happens when I refresh this page? Yeah.
Started with
There we go. Is my web server started?
no,
No.
you can't stop.
Right. So if I go, so all I need to do, anytime I see the oops page, I just need to be in my website directory in Rails S. Yeah, I'm getting a warning, but I know why exactly. It's not worth. We'll get into it later. So if I come back here, voila. So basically, the takeaway is the web server we stop. The web server is what serves up our Rails app, which this is what this is. This is our Rails app. The web server serves it up. When we turn it on, it works. It fields this request and says, oh, give back this particular website. But when we stop the web server, it doesn't, it's not listening anymore. Think of it as like a phone call. Web server sitting on the other side of the phone call waiting for somebody to answer. Or waiting for somebody to call, I mean. And that's what this is. Any questions on this? Just Rails S, and again, and you'll see right here, you can, we'll keep this terminal window open. You'll always, and what I would recommend you do is you can have multiple terminal windows open. What I tend to do or try to do, and I don't always do it in class, but when I'm working at my desk and on Rails, I'll always have one terminal window just dedicated to running the server, and then that way I can watch all the debug and all the output coming out, and we'll get over that in the next probably week. You'll see all this stuff coming through, and you just know start and stop based on what you're doing.
Does that slow down your computer a lot though? That has it up?
No, this web server is super lightweight. And all of our computers are modern enough that it can handle this no problem. Okay. Any questions about this? Yeah.
Can we go over a scaffolding example just to make sure that we have it running on the server?
You are one step ahead.
What
we
was
got-
the word on the homework? Resources?
Yeah. So
I'm not sure exactly what that was.
we'll get to that here in a second. So any questions about Git or just web server basics? This is a built-in web server that is really good for developing against Rails. It's not the web server you use on when you push to production or Heroku, and we'll kind of get to that at some point later in the semester. But Rails S, Control C, Rails S, Control C. If you see an oops, Rails S, and it almost certainly will fix the problem. Any questions? Okay. Let's go ahead and kill our server. Let's start talking about the anatomy of a Rails app. So who wants to remind me? I know we talked about this yesterday, but I'm going to reinforce it. What is Rails? Framework, right? And it comes bundled with a whole bunch of stuff that we do every time with every website. What are some examples of the sorts of things it just gives us for free? Gives us a server. Server's a great example. What else does it give us?
Just starting the
Well, I'm really looking for, there's things you do within a website pretty commonly. CRUD. CRUD. It stuff. What remind me what does CRUD stand for?
Create, read, upload,
Create, read, update, and delete. So those are the four kind of core things that you do over and over and over and over again. And so the guy who created Rails is like, man, I'm doing this stuff every time. Let me just bundle this thing into a sweet thing called Rails, and voila. It gives us a lot of default functionality for free. Okay? And so let's do a scaffolding example. We'll talk a little bit about scaffolding, and then we're going to dive into the files it creates and look at them very closely, very quickly. I mean, not very quickly, very closely and comprehensively, and understand what they're all doing and how they all interact with each other. Okay? So the command, remember, So Rails is sort of our core command, right? This and another command called rake are the two primary commands we're going to be doing inside of terminal. Rails more than rake by far. The next piece of the command is G, which stands for generate, right? So what this basically does is it creates files for us, creates things for us. And then the next part is called scaffold, okay? And what scaffold does for us is it creates the infrastructure behind MVC. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But MVC stands for Model View Controller. And it's the modern way websites are built. So the takeaway is that scaffold creates all the component parts you need to actually run a portion of a website. You know, manage users, manage products, manage whatever it is you are trying to build into your website. And in this particular case, we're going to start with user, okay? Now, who remembers, so we got Rails G, scaffold, and because we want to do user, what do I type next? Does anyone remember? Uppercase, capital U,
capital U, lowercase everything else.
yeah, singular or plural? Singular, and this is very, very important. You want to make it singular, okay? This is our resource or our entity, okay? And the way to look at it is you've got your website, and a website is a collection of things that you can do, things that you can describe about a person, you know, like Facebook. Let's take Facebook, for example, right? One of their entities is user. And I use the word entity or resource. They're sort of interchangeable. Okay? What is another entity or resource Facebook has? Post. Perfect example. And not to be confused, and I'm actually going to change that just to avoid confusion. Status update. I don't want you guys being like post, like HTTP post. Okay? These are things within Facebook that they have actions, they have descriptions.
What about
Message. What's another one?
groups? Like, I didn't know.
No, but think of, is it plural or singular? Group. You know, and so we commonly refer to in Facebook groups, but in the entity or resource world, it would always be singular. It's group. Let's do one more. Huh? Event. Yep. So these are all examples. If we were to peel back the onion on Facebook and see how they've organized their software, they would have entities or resources that they refer to as a user, a status update, a group, a message, an event, and probably 5 dozen more, right? So these are sort of the core components of a Rails app. We have a user, we have a status update. So a user, remember, there are things you can do to a user, and there are things that describe a user, right? When we're scaffolding, we're never talking about things you can do to a resource or entity. We're only talking about things that describe it. And for those of you who are familiar with databases, what we're talking about are sort of the database columns, okay? So what are some things that describe a user? First. ID, good one, but ID is auto-generated. So some fields like ID, the date they were created, and the date that they were last updated, those 3 columns you get for free by default through Scaffold. It does it for you. And we'll show you that here in a little bit. But first name, but before we move on to another data type, another one. First name, what kind of data is that?
String.
It's a string, right? So when you're scaffolding, you say, I have an entity, and it's called a user, or it's called a status update, or it's called a group. Okay? Then I have a series of things that describe it. Now it could be one thing, it could be 50 things. And then I tell it, for each one of those things that describe it, what kind of data is it? And through Scaffold, these are the different data types that you have. Now, are these Rails data types? Some of them are. I'm sorry, not Rails, Ruby data types. Anybody see something that doesn't look familiar? Decimal, binary, date, time, right? So these are actual data types that map to the database. So when you're scaffolding, you give it a data type, but you can also be a little bit more specific than Ruby is accustomed to with the data type. Meaning you can say, this is a string, this is a text, right? This is a date time, this is a timestamp. Those are things that Ruby doesn't support, but Rails does.
When you say that there's like a text, does it give you a specific amount of room, or does it keep going?
So that's a great question.
When we did the bio yesterday,
Yeah.
was it only like 3 lines or whatever?
Well, so the difference is, let's keep going. I'll answer that question here in 2 seconds. That's a good one, though. So last name is a string. Bio is text. Does anybody have any idea what the difference between text and string is?
Text is like a block. String, probably, right?
Yeah, string, you limit the size of it. You could say this string is 255 characters. This string is 500 characters. So it's a great use for first name, for last name, for address, for city, state, that sort of thing. Text it's not unlimited, but it's pretty damn big. I think the last time I checked, you could store up to 2 gigs of data in a text data type. So we're talking like novels you can store inside of a text, okay? So it's good for biography. It's good for write me a 5-paragraph essay on, whatever. So if you have big blobs of text, and then to your point, we'll get into this in the view, when you're actually looking at it, you can make that window as big as you want. Okay, let's do one more, age. What would that be?
Text. Well, sorry, age.
Integer. I'm 36 years old. That's 36. That's a number, right? That's not, TJ is bicycle years old, So,
What if could you use like a float if you wanted to be more specific?
Sure.
Like you're 36 years old and 300 days.
yeah, I mean, you certainly could, but I don't know the last time somebody told me they were,
I know.
it's like a 9-year-old. I'm 9.5 years old. Don't forget it, TJ. It's my niece yelling at me for telling her she was only 9. So yes, you could totally do a float and have a decimal. And for what it's worth, you can make age a string, if you wanted to. So these things aren't like hard. Like if you make age a string, the creator of Ruby on Rails isn't going to pop out of your computer and beat you over the head. You can use a string or an integer if you want, but try to keep them as sort of common sense as possible. So, anyways, these are what when we say resources, we talk about resources or entities. This is what we're talking about. You're going to hear me use that word a lot. You're going to hear me use the word resource or entity a lot. Resource is more the Ruby on Rails kind of accepted term. I use entity because I'm an old database guy, and that's the old database term. They're the same thing. Resource is entity, entity is resource. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Is age a resource? No. The way to think of a resource or entity is it maps, and I don't want to be like 100% of the time, but most of the time, an entity maps to an object in our world, right? To a class. So remember we were doing OOP last week. We're creating classes, a product, a user, a person. Those map pretty closely to resources. Okay, so let's keep moving. So we've got our command up here, Rails G scaffold user. And so let's put in these data types. So let's do first name string, and you'll notice no spaces, no spaces, no spaces. Somebody will do that, and it's okay. But then somebody else will do it, and somebody else will do it, and somebody else will do it. So just remember, always use underscore and give it your data type. Okay.
And never any commas.
No, separated by spaces. So you do first name string and then space, last name string, space, bio, text, and age integer. Yo.
I ran into an issue where I think I used a reserve word or something. I used type,
Oh yeah.
and it totally, it ended up like crashing my my website when I
Yeah.
ran it. And I tried to go back and fix some things. So maybe this is a question for later, but I was going to ask you about how to delete something.
Yeah. You guys go ahead, follow through, and I'll show you how to undo this. So Rails G scaffold user, and so everybody got this, and go ahead and hit go. Should see something like this. You good?
Good.
Okay, there was a.
No.
Okay,
This
that was just more of the
sense.
like, this is cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Got it. So nobody else do this. So if you get to a point where you've run scaffold and something went haywire, you realize you totally screwed it up. You spelled user wrong. You spelled a data type wrong. There's a couple of courses of action. At this stage, since we haven't really done anything, we can undo all of that if we want to. And I'm pretty sure it's Rails destroy scaffold user. So you don't put in the data types. You just do Rails destroy scaffold and then your entity or resource.
It's going to destroy that entire resource of everything.
Yeah.
associated with it.
And if you spelled user wrong, would you put the wrong?
You use the wrong spelling. Yeah. Yep. So let me do that, make sure that works. Yeah. So hold on one second, Kevin. So notice I just ran Rails destroy scaffold user, and you'll notice it did basically the same thing again, but instead of creating everything, it's removing everything. Okay? Kevin, what you got?
Sorry for going over this, but for user, do you have to specifically say capital user? Like, I know there has to be a capital, but does it have to be a user, or can you name it something else?
Call it whatever you want. For a user, now, there are certain kind of conventions, right? And Rails is big on conventions, but this isn't even a Rails convention. This is just a computer programming convention. 80% of the websites out there that have a login, they call their login a user. I've come across systems that call them account. I've come across them call them member. I've seen them call them login user. But most of them call it a user. It's sort of the generally accepted name for the person, like the people who are users of the system. So if I came in behind you and saw that you called it member, I'd be like, okay, I see what he's doing. But if you called it like, Marvelous Marvin, I'd be like, what? So, and it goes true. It's true of naming conventions in general. New programmers are like, oh, names don't matter. I'll just name it whatever the hell I want. Well, names are super important in programming because it's what gives the other developers a guidepost. Okay. Let me rescaffold that. Okay. So at this stage, I'm going to do kind of the same thing that I normally do. I'm going to start up my server and kind of do a quick sanity check, right? So Rails S. And my server started up no problem. Now, does anybody think, is this going to run okay? No? What do we think is going to happen?
Do they tell you need to migrate?
Yeah. So what we do when we do scaffold when we scaffold, several things happen, okay? We create files. We create, one of them is a model. We'll talk about all this coming up, so don't worry. We create a controller. We create views, which creates 6 views. 6 or 7. It creates 6 or 7 view files. Again, we'll describe what these things mean here in a little bit. It does some style sheets. Okay? So it creates a whole bunch of files that we need to run web pages. Okay, these comprise the web pages that we need to run our website, or this particular portion of our website. Okay? It creates migration scripts. What do we think this means? Not quite. Yeah, no, that's good. So where do we store all of our data? In a database. So we have hanging out over here a database, and we're going to do a whole week on databases next week. Okay? Databases, for every resource we create, we have a corresponding table over here. It creates a table called user. Okay? If we created a resource called product, it would create a table called product, right? So this is where we store all the data. We're going to do a lot of work on what all these database stuff, all this database terminology means next week. But for now, just be aware that our data that we type in gets stored somewhere.
Will we review how to associate that data within Rails at some point?
Oh, hell yeah.
This week, or is it after next week?
No, it's next week. I'm going to go ahead and say next Wednesday and Thursday, I'm going to blow all of your minds with what Erica just asked. So just go ahead and,
And so you said for every resource we create, it stores in the database. And I take it stores it as like this one resource and
Yeah.
the other resource and the other.
bingo, exactly. So for every resource, think of a database. If you're totally unfamiliar with databases, I'm certain that all of you are familiar with Microsoft Excel, spreadsheets. Okay, and a spreadsheet has multiple sheets. By default, it has 3 sheets. You can add as many as you want. A sheet is an analog to a table. So you have a user sheet, right? And then in that sheet, you have columns and you have rows. The columns correspond to the database columns. So you'd have first name, last name, bio, age in the A row, those columns. And then you'd have the data below it. The exact same thing with databases, with the kinds of databases we're going to be doing. Okay? So anyways, so when we scaffold, we create all these files, these cool files that make our website really rad, and then we create a migration script. Okay? And what the migration script actually means is, here are the instructions that the database needs to create the database, create the table, I mean, and the corresponding columns that go with that. And again, we're going to really dive into that hardcore next week, but for now, you just need to know that it creates this script that after you scaffold, you must migrate that script. Okay, so before we do that, let's go ahead and Rails S. Okay. So we haven't run our migration script. I'm giving you guys a sneak peek. We will get an error here. We haven't run our migration script, but our server started up just fine. Because there's no problem with our code. It's just we haven't created our database properly. So our database is a little bit broken right now.
So basically, that's moving what you have on your local computer to the it's moving it over to what you're gonna have in GitHub, basically?
No. This is all completely independent of GitHub. So GitHub just stores our code. That's all it does. It manages our code. We're now running the web server on our local machine. So we're not moving anything off of our computer right now. Everything's running on everything we need. Our database, our Ruby on Rails, our web server, everything's right here. So if we go back to our web page and refresh, you'll get an error. And this is a very, very common error. And this is sort of the first lesson of today, which is we're all, and I keep saying this, we're all smart, savvy, articulate adults. And here's what I see all the time with new developers and seasoned developers. This is exactly what I see. Okay, so let me shut down my server. Where'd my cursor go? Oh, there it is, okay. So refresh my page. It's not running, right? Web server's not running because I shut it down. So this is exactly what I see. And about half of you will do this to me at some point this session. Start your server. Cool, everything's good. All right, TJ, I'm running it. Oh, I got an error. TJ, it's broken. It's broken. Rails, it's broken. We're never going to recover, TJ. We're never going to recover. And what I'm getting at here is you guys broke it, and you never even read the error. So my coaching tip here is when you see that red error of doom, take a second. What's that? Run.
The nuclear missiles have been launched.
Give up on programming. You're never going to make it. No, it's slow down. Everybody just take a deep breath and say, okay, I got an error. What is the error telling me? Migrations are pending. And then here's where Rails is my favorite programming language, programming framework of all time. No other programming framework that I'm aware of says, to resolve this issue, do exactly this. 90% of the time, if you just follow the instructions right here, you will fix your problem. So, to resolve this problem, we have the solution here. There is a slightly more elegant way to run this. Well, that's what I'm getting at. It's like the rake command, what I was telling you about, is actually stored in the bin. But you don't actually have to do, and I'll show you that. So we kill off our thing, and to fix this, you just do rake db migrate. Okay? Rake db : migrate. And that will actually take these scripts that it's created, these migration scripts that have been created by Rails, and it'll actually create our user table with all the columns that we need. In this example, how many columns have we specified? 4, right? First name, last name, bio, age. So it'll create a database table that we'll kind of show you guys how to look at later with one table called user and 4 columns. So let's go ahead and run that. And we see, voila, create table. So the output is a tad bit mysterious, but we can see that something was done, a create tables command was run, and we should be good to go. Any questions on db migrate? So when do you run db migrate in all that we've learned so far? When do you run it?
After your step.
If I stop my server, go just change a file, a view or something like that, do I need to db migrate then? I want a more definitive answer.
Yes.
No. Good guess though. You get more credit than Scott though. He hedged. At least you were confident. No, you don't. The only time you scaffold, the only time you run a db migrate is when you scaffold after you scaffold, and there will be other times we'll cover here shortly. But for now, when you scaffold, the first thing you do after you scaffold is rake DB migrate.
What is migrations are pending? Is that
Yeah. So what? Are you still seeing the error after you run DB migrate?
yeah.
So you ran DB migrate and you're still seeing error?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's hold on. So if let me fire this up. Yeah. My guess is that something was wrong with your scaffold. Actually, would you mind showing me? I just want to see this. Oh, you got an error.
I'm not sure if that's the they can hold it and see if they can get it done.
Or even Sublime is more complicated because it shows you this correct. Yeah. Well, I mean, I like it in Sublime, but even in this, if it could do the color versus what you typed, and then
Had you already created that, perhaps?
That was one that I never messed up.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
deleted it, and then I tried to, I scaffolded it.
Yeah.
and I raked it.
Let me try to reproduce the error I'm seeing here. So this is pretty common. What Jamie's seeing is pretty common. So let me. So. Okay, that didn't work. I'm trying to get an error to happen. So give me 1 second, guys.
Well, no, but I don't know. Next time, just turn off the server and
Shoot. I'm trying to break it and I can't figure out. So during the break, let's see if we can't figure out what you scaffolded.
I wrote, for one of my things I wrote type colon, text.
Oh, okay. So
the scaffold didn't work in Rails. You did the fact that it's asking you to migrate means scaffold.
and you did what did you say, Jamie? You did type colon.
Type colon,
Okay, so that's because.
seemed like it was okay until I read it.
Where do you mean, like, you did scouting?
I can't get it. So
You did-
um, but-
well, I mean, it didn't show up, I don't know if it showed up on there.
well, what you're seeing when you ran a rake DB migrate,
Yeah.
when you run a rake DB migrate and you see more than 4 lines, so this is an example of look real close at what comes back. If you get more than 4 lines, you get a whole stream of stuff, something broke. And call me over so I can see what happened and kind of reproduce it and show it to the rest of the class.
I have a whole nother issue.
Okay.
My Rails, it was working and now it's not working at all. I'm getting all kind of RVM errors.
After class.
Okay, so I see virtually the same thing as on the screen, right? But when I go over to the browser and I put /user
Huh?
and refresh, I get the oops message again. And that's where I was last night.
Are you sure you're running your server? Positive 100%. So sure that you'll bet $16 on it.
All right, well, do you run your server while you're in your awesome? Or do you back up and run it?
Oh, you run the server inside the folder. Yeah. And that's not to say you can get the oops for something else, but that's usually it usually suggests that the browser can't even find the site at all.
So you're gonna start your server and then you're gonna do the DB migrate?
No, the only time you want to start the server is when you want to view it in the browser. It's the only time. When you're not viewing it in the browser, you can go ahead and shut it down.
Okay, so I'm still confused then, because we started it did a DB rate, so were we supposed to?
No, I killed it. So everybody pay attention to this order of operations. So there's only hold on. What back there? I'm sorry, Aaron. Yeah, I want you guys to pay attention here. So I want everybody to be super clear on when you run the server. Super clear. Okay? Right now, is my server running? No. So if I go,
Because it's got the prompt.
so I have my little cursor here, right? So if I go to my site and I hit go, I will get oops. Oops. What this means, and if we're to closely inspect this error, what this is telling us is not a server error. This is not a problem with Rails. What this is saying is Chrome, the browser, can't even find this website. Nothing's running that's listening, waiting for somebody to call it up and say, hey, give me some web pages. Okay? So to solve that problem, I go to the folder that in the project I'm working in, which is Awesome Website. Inside that project, I type Rails S. Okay, so now take a real close look at this. So everybody sees this. WebBrick server started. This is how you know your server's running. Okay? I go back to my web page, and it's running. Okay? So now, the next step is, I want you to add another resource. Scaffold one more thing. What do I do, Amy?
I'm still trying to figure out something else. I'm trying to figure out at what point were you supposed to do the rate before all.
Don't even worry about rake. Don't even worry. Let's just focus on when to run the web server and when not to run the web server. So right now the web server is running, and I come to you guys and say, hey, I want another resource. It's the first thing I do. Kill my web server. Stop the web server. So I go here and I stop it, right? So is my web server running or stopped? Stopped. Let's scaffold a new resource. And I'm going to get to your answer here. This is a roundabout way of getting to your answer. Let's scaffold a new resource. Let's call it product. Is product, what do I type here? Capital P, lowercase p, plural, singular? Capital P, and it's singular. So just like that, not lowercase, not plural. And then it's a series of columns. So it's a name, right? And it's a string, and a description, and it's text. Okay? Just give it 2 fields. That's all we need. And let's hit return. Oh, okay. Well, this might be one of the problems you were getting earlier. Okay, so let's pay very close attention very quickly. So first, before y'all look up here, is everybody able to scaffold a new resource called product? Any problems? And I'm sorry, you guys can go back to where you go. I got an error. I got this error because while I was trying to figure out how Jamie, how she got to where she is, I had already created a scaffold. I already scaffolded a resource called product. So now I'm trying to create another one called product. So I've already got one. And at this stage, I should be able to just move forward. I've already got a resource called product. I can kind of ignore this. You're probably not going to see this particular error all that much because you'll know you've already created a particular resource. Okay, so where we're at now, we just scaffolded something. What do we do now? We rake. So right after scaffolding, and Amy, the only reason earlier I scaffolded it and then started the server was I wanted to show you the error. So one of the complaints I got from my last class was I didn't show them enough errors. So I'm showing you guys error after damn error because it is a difficult thing to learn as a programmer, how to parse errors, how to understand errors. So that's why I did that.
Scaffold rake, then
Scaffold rake, then Rails S. Okay. Okay. So I did not get anything back from RakeDB Migrate. Because I've been working with this thing so bad, my project might be screwed. So I'm gonna try Rails S-ing it and see what happens. Okay, so my server started up. I'm gonna go back to our browser, right? We've got a running web server. Reload the main page, and we're running. Is everybody running? Does anybody see pending migration error? Okay. So now you can navigate to /users. We'll discuss how all that fanciness works next tomorrow, called routing. But go to /users, and you should see something like this. Anybody not see a page with first name, last name, bio age? Okay. Let's create a new user. So first name is TJ Muleman, and teacher, encoder. And then pay close attention to the age and notice that it's a little, and I'm going to explain that here in a second. Yeah. So let's take a quick look at this. So we're doing a quick Rails anatomy from the outside looking in. Like, we're going to actually dive into the project after the break. But from the outside looking in, meaning from the browser, from a user's perspective, we see a web page here that allows us to, of all the CRUD operations, which CRUD operation are we doing right here? Okay, it's create. We're creating a brand new user, which is a post, right? We talked at the beginning, very, very beginning of the course, that there's create, read, update, delete, and post, put, get, delete, those HTTP verbs. So this is a post, okay? So notice that this field is just pretty straightforward. It's just a regular input we've all seen 1,000 times on 1,000 websites. This is a string. So when we give it a data type of string, we get a fairly straightforward input. Same thing with last name. Now bio, does anybody know what HTML element that is? No, paragraphs are for reading. Text area. Text area. So these first two are just inputs. This is a text area. And then notice age, because we made it an integer, is actually has something that ticks up and ticks down. What's that? Oh, yours doesn't? Oh, that's weird. Are you in Chrome? Oh, are you? What are you in over there?
Chrome is kind of slow for me sometimes. So Firefox.
What's up?
I know you keep saying use Chrome, but my Chrome doesn't like to operate correctly.
if you have a problem with, you can use Firefox. Or
I've been
Safari.
using Safari.
Yeah, that's fine. Firefox is preferable over Safari, but you're fine. But I'm going to do everything in Chrome. So if you're like, hey, TJ, how do you do blah? And I'm like, I don't know.
It's just when I come here, like Chrome doesn't like to work when I'm in this building. When I go home, Chrome works fine. It's just the
I've heard of stranger things, but yeah. Okay, so when we type in through Scaffold, right? So Scaffold creates all these things for us. It creates this form for us. It knows, oh, because age is an integer in Chrome, it gives us this drop down. It knows because bio is text, it gives us a text area. And we'll do some more demonstrations with other data types, date time, and that sort of thing.
Is it correct to assume that you can create multiple scaffolds and just rank them all at once?
Yeah. Oh, great question. Yes. So the question is, can I do multiple scaffolds and then rank them all at once? Yes. what will happen is it'll create multiple migration scripts. So for each scaffold, you get a migration script. And when you migrate, it just runs them all. And we'll show you that here in a little bit.
TJ, can you put up the data types one more time? You have a list up real briefly.
Oh, yeah. If you Google, I'll put this in one of the lessons, but I'll tell you right now. I'll show you the ones you will use and the ones you won't use. Probably won't use this. Probably won't use these two. I'm preferable, like if I'm going to do a date, I'm just going to do a date time. And, I mean, what's the difference between date and date time and time, or date and date time?
Doesn't have time.
Yeah, date is literally just month, day, year. Date time is month, day, year, hour, minute, second.
So that seems pretty much like timestamp.
Timestamp's a little bit different. Timestamp, and Eric, I'm guessing you probably know this one. This is what's called, I never pronounce this right, epoch time? Epic time? Does anybody know what that is? The number of seconds between January 1st, 1970 and the current time.
Wow, that's awfully arbitrary.
It's also called Unix time. So it's stored as an integer. So think about it this way, right? So we're in the United States. We're in Atlanta, Georgia. So today is 04/29/2014, and it is 9:10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time? Savings time. I don't know, whatever it is. This is a date time. What if I'm in London? It's not that format, it's not that format, and it ain't that time zone. So by giving it an epoch time or Unix time, it's just a number of seconds. You can do some simple date time math to say, oh, well, it's this time, and convert it to a new time zone, a new whatever. It's just a more generic way of storing date time that is independent of formatting and style. So that's what timestamp is. And that is your Jeopardy question of the day.
Why 1970?
That's when computers were invented? No, I don't know. That's somebody in 1970 was like, man, we need a better way to store date times. And they were like, hey, I got an idea.
It starts from tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know, it's weird. So that's what it is. So these are the most common data types you'll use. And the ones at the bottom are usable, but generally won't use them that much. Okay. So back to here. So I go ahead and create my user, and I have now created a user. Where is this data stored? My database. My database that's hanging out over here that we're not going to really talk about until next week. But the data is saved, right? So if I go back to the main users page, I will see one of the users, okay? I can edit that user, I can destroy that user. And in this particular view, which of the CRUD operations am I doing? Right this very second. This is a read. What is this? Read. What is this? Update. And then the last one's destroy. And then new is? Yeah. So again, have we written any code? Nope. We haven't. For you guys, it's like, damn, I want to write some code, man. For me, I'm like, hell no, I haven't written any code. It's awesome. Out of the box, by default, Rails gives you this infrastructure for free. We get a database. We get 3 or 4 web pages. We get actions. We get things we can do. And it makes it very, very straightforward. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Let's reconvene at 9:25.